But first, we're going to move into our first panel discussion of the day, centered on a crucial topic in pediatric innovation: advanced therapies for pediatric rare diseases from promise to access. The session brings together a rich diversity of perspectives from clinical research, biotechnology, and investment to patient advocacy. Together, they will explore not only the scientific promise of advanced therapies, but also the barriers and opportunities involved in ensuring access for the children and families who need them. It is my pleasure to introduce our panel moderator, Joanna Claverol, Head of Clinical Research Unit at Sant Joan de Déu, Barcelona Children's Hospital. And our speakers as well, Dr. Laura Carrera, Neuromuscular Disorders Unit, Department of Pediatric Neurology at Sant Joan de Déu, Barcelona Children's Hospital, Javier Garcia, co-founder of Columbus Venture Partners, Jesus Merino, president of La Lucha de Abril, and Diego Pignataro, project management manager, SPG 50 Viral Gen. Before we begin, just a quick note. This roundtable will be conducted in Spanish. So if you need, and if you already have from outside, there is simultaneous interpretation available. Once the discussion has finished, you may return the equipment during the coffee break. I believe it's channel 3, we have said. So Joanna, over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. This one, yeah. Oh, I think there is an overlap with the mic here. I will speak here. Yeah, I know it's in Spanish, but I want to introduce in English the speakers, they know that. So first of all, thank you to my colleagues from the Innovation Department. They invited me some months ago to work in this roundtable. Honestly, I was supposed to be at the European Medicines Agency today because there is a pediatric day. But when they tempted me with this roundtable, I, of course, decided to be here because this is a very strategic point for us. So I would like to introduce, first of all, myself. I'm the Director of Clinical Research at the Research Institute Sant Joan de Déu. I am head of the Clinical Trials Unit. And I will very briefly introduce you the speakers, and then we will switch to Spanish. So first of all, Dr. Laura Carrera, she's a pediatric neurologist in our hospital in the neuromuscular pathology unit of Sant Joan de Déu. And she's a member of the clinical trials unit because she's sitting there every day of her life. She has focused on clinical electromyographic, genetic, and therapeutic aspects of pediatric patients with neuromuscular diseases. But she's beyond a very good doctor. She's a very good researcher, and she's a principal investigator for different studies in our unit, and also projects on the description of the medical history of the natural history of these diseases, focus on neuromuscular and rare diseases. So thank you, Laura, for joining us. She has a great experience in advanced therapies administration, so it's great that you are here. Then I will introduce Javier. Javier Garcia, he's the founding partner of Columbus Venture Partners, investing in biopharma, life science, and medtech. He has over 25 years of experience in Eli Lilly company in the past, and he brings a deep industry expertise and leadership. He serves on the boards of Highlighting Therapeutics, Vivid Therapeutics, Viral Gen Vector, Cocoon Therapeutics, Singoi, and NER. Wow. And he's the founder and secretary of Fundación Columbus. They are working very close with our institution. We will explain afterwards. And he's dedicated and very, very experienced in the field of advanced therapies in ultra-rare diseases. Thank you, Javier. Now I will introduce Jesus. Jesus is a senior technician in electronics and officer of the Mossos d'Esquadra. For those of you that you don't know, the Mossos d'Esquadra, it's a Catalan police. But he's not here because of that. He's here because he's also a father and an affected girl Abril, and he's the founder of La Liga de Abril. This is a foundation because they are affected with an ultra-rare condition, SPG52. So he's the president of this association, and he combines his work, his professional work in the Catalan police force with this commitment and supporting research on gene therapy. So you will see how parents support research directly, and this is part of the model that we want to discuss today, because this is not the standard way to develop medicines, what we will approach here. Thank you for joining us, and then we will switch in Spanish also because for him it's easier, so don't worry. And last but not least, Diego Pignarato, he holds a PhD. He's the head of the project management department at Viragen, where he oversees the program and execution and client communication for advanced and gene therapy projects. And he brings more than a decade of experience in AAV vector research and development, including roles at the CIMA University of Navarra and International Research Institute. And he will bring the vision of the complexity of the technology that we are talking about here and the role that they play in the middle of this development. So I will very briefly I will sit, first of all, and just focus on the objective of this. No, I will not sit because I have some slides. And the objective of this session today, which is basically to analyze how families, hospitals, foundations, and industrial partners, the ones that are sitting here, can overcome the barriers that we face to accelerate the access of these advanced therapies to patients living with rare conditions when there is no commercial interest. So that's the focus of our presentation and our discussion. So I will very briefly just focus on some slides, again, because we are talking about that. These are rare and ultra-rare diseases, and you know these numbers. These are small numbers, but overall, these are not small numbers when you see that affect 3 million people in Spain. That has been also mentioned, less than 50% have a diagnosis, and we will discuss about that, because it's very difficult to find a treatment if you don't even know what are you fighting, if you don't know the name of the disease. So this is a dramatic situation that we have to improve. 94% of these diseases have no treatment. That's why we are here today, to see how to change this reality, because what is clear is that the standard development of drugs, it's not the model for these particular conditions. We know that 80% of them are genetic. That's why we are here talking about advanced therapies, because we really believe that these therapies can play a big role to treat or potentially cure part of these diseases. And of course, 75% of these have their onset in the pediatric setting. So it means that they affect children at the beginning. But this is the reality of the market. 29 advanced therapies have been authorized in 16 years. 12 include pediatric indications, but 8 of these have been withdrawn from the market. And the reason, it's not particularly for safety reasons, it's basically for commercial reasons, because there is no model of return of investment in these treatments. So that's why we are here today, to discuss a different approach and to see how in a different way we can solve the access to these treatments and change this paradigm. So we are losing competitiveness in Europe in terms of research. The fact the numbers are dramatic when you compare to US and China. And that is also a challenge, because it means that our European population will have less access to innovative treatments. And that, guys, it's a problem for all of us. Of course, the conventional development of drugs, as we have seen with the withdrawal from the market, it's not suitable for these therapies, and access remains a limitation. So now, yes, I will sit, and I will start the discussion with the father, because we are here because of him, and because of Pilar, because she came with him to the hospital once, and he introduces us the situation of Jesus. So, ahora paso al castellano. Jesús, tranquilo.
I will now switch to Spanish. Don't worry, Jesus. I wanted you to explain. I was saying that you're here due to a need that you have, and it's a need that many other parents have, and this is why we're having today this round table. So please explain a little bit your vital path, the why you are here, and also the second part, which role are you playing with pushing for investigation for a possible treatment? Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation to be here. Thank you to all the people that have managed and have made possible us being here. Our history begins with Abril, with a cognitive development and a baby development at 10 months it started, and we had a feeling that something was going wrong, that was not properly growing correctly within her. At 3 years of age, we had a late diagnosis. I consider it as a late diagnosis because I think a sickness to diagnose it at 3 years is late when we felt something at 10. So it's the SPG52 disease, the one that was developed. And so our geneticist and our neurologist said that there's only 6 diagnoses in the world of this sickness, and that they do not know what is going to happen with Abril. They don't know what will happen in the future. Will she have muscular problems? The clinic pathology describes certain things, but there's not a specific path. There's nothing to be expected, and that we will have to learn as we go, basically. And so it was a shock for our family, of course. But we said, okay, well, let's not just stand still. I mean, this path that is unwalked, we need to build it ourselves. And that's why we created the Fight for Abril Association, to give Abril a better future, to give a better future to the diagnosis that existed at that time, and to try and create a path, to trailblaze, basically, to ensure that just like you go to the doctor today and any disease gives you a structure and says, okay, this is what you have, this is what we're going to do, these are the tests that we're going to do, you have this medicine, this drug that we will test, we will try this new treatment. So with Abril, we did not have that, and as parents, we were scared due to the lack of knowledge. We were looking for information on a constant basis. We were trying to do our daily job with the taking care of Abril, with the taking care of our other daughter, working in this association. So it was a tough path. And how did you decide to change this path? And how did you end up in the Autonomous University of Barcelona by pushing for an investigation? Well, at the end of the day, we thought, look, if we just sink and we just don't try whatever we believe is necessary, if we don't give that opportunity to Abril, to the other kids with that disease, we just had this feeling of sadness. We turned it into work. We started doing events, we started selling solidarity products, we were looking for information, and it was casual, it was unexpected. Through an IGTP neurologist, Miriam Tiron from the Autonomous University of Barcelona, we met her and we presented our project as an association. We didn't have an investigation project, we just had a work project. We presented it to them, and the team wanted to take responsibility for this possible gene therapy for the SPG52. We wanted to give an opportunity to these kids, and that work has reached today a very high point. We have over 750,000 euros for the university, collected for the university. For a single family is a lot of money collected, honestly. And we're in an investigation that is in phase 3 out of 4 phases, so we're really, really proud to have managed this. I would like to give the floor now to our colleague from Vidalgen, to Diego, because he has explained that they financed an investigation in pre-clinic at university. They have done the animal models, the animal testing, and so therefore this needs to take this step beyond from the pre-clinic to clinic, the transatlantic step. So we'll need not only an investigator in a clinical trials unit, but we also need financing and we will also need technology. And to be able to talk about technology, I wanted to ask Diego, what do you have to do? Where could you have a role in this moment before concluding preclinic and going into the clinic phase? Well, also thank all the organizers and all the people that are here. I understand perfectly that perspective, those few questions that you might have of what is this? How do I treat it? How long do I have to create a medicine? How long will it take the medicine to have an effect? How much will it cost? With the time that I have, I think it's important to highlight we're talking about a virus that has been modified to have the DNA sequence into the organ or cell that needs that modified virus, and so therefore we become partners, VRG or other partners. We start creating these viral vectors. But something needs to be taken into account is the moment I start developing a concept in the lab, a concept test that will be what you will treat in your daughter in the clinic, there needs to be a very clear path. There needs to be a certain communication from the basic investigators to what you're going to take to the clinic. I come from academia, and we do focus a lot on the short path, on getting results, on treating cells, on healing the animal models. So basically, the short path. But we need to take into account the long path also. What do I need for this concept test to be valid not only at an academia level, but also at a clinical level? So for us, it would be absolutely wonderful to have someone that arrives and says, okay, we have a secure test. For example, a viral vector that has preliminary data on stability, it has a formula, it has security data also, questions that maybe in the lab we do not ask. And so from that communication, from that initial development with us and with any entity that is generating these vectors directed to a clinic, we know some cases where we developed for many years therapy at the academia level, and the results are wonderful. And this product that has been tested at a small level needs to be taken to clinical level. We need to produce a lot of liters of a product because this is a virus that is produced within cells. And what happens? Once we free these cells, we liberate these viral vectors. For example, if we take the example of a bottle, the bottle has certain particles that capture this virus, and these particles capture most of these virus, but some of them are modified virus that are new virus that are impossible to capture, and they are lost. And that's why we enter a development phase that could also be limited in a certain way. The investigator that has spent years and years working on that would have to recheck, look backwards, and redevelop a new concept test, which will require time, costs, money. And so also, how long do I have, how much time do I have to develop this therapy? Because the clock never stops. I think it is very relevant for Jesus, this information, also to divulge it to other associations that, with a very good will, are pushing for and financing this preclinical investigation. But they need to take into account that this program needs to incorporate the scalability phase to go into clinic. So maybe if you haven't taken that into account, you have to go back to the beginning to retest this medication. So it's important to share it with other associations that are pushing for all of this, and obviously due to a lack of knowledge, because obviously all these technicities and all these regulation parts you don't need to know them. Within the work that you do within the association, working for the association, for your family, for your work, you certainly need to learn about genetics, all the lack of protocols that should exist. For example, you need to work in learning about that, so the associations, the parents have a path that's slightly clearer, slightly easier, so it would be relevant to be able to build that. I wanted to continue talking with Diego because there's over 6,000 rare diseases, many of them genetic. So if we needed to create 6,000 treatments, it would be tough. So how to do the scalability of this? It has a high cost, obviously. You have a certain model that works well. So could you explain the platform model that you have to make this scalable and sustainable? Because clearly families cannot expect to have complete development for so many diseases. Yes, the platform concept is basic. When we want to reduce time and cost, we need it. We follow a single recipe to generate a certain product. This recipe allows us to work with a vector set, and we'll do small adjustments with each recipe to make it specific to the product. But since 2019, which is when we began, we've seen that there's an evolution not only on the technology part, because we can produce more, but we can also have a more exact formula for the product that will reach the clinic part. But we're also starting to see certain flexibility from the regulating agencies to be able to accept that it is not necessary to repeat over and over again the same product so that it is validated at a commercial phase. We can use the data of the recipe that we have used for other products, for example. So this is the basis and the support, and to say, look, our process is characterized according to these parameters, and it can be applied to the product for your specific need. So this is an advantage. This is a constant evolution that we're living through, and I would like to put the emphasis on having to work on the gap from the development of the investigation part and going to the clinical part also, but we also need to cover also the clinical manufacturing to hospital path, because there's also information gaps in that path. We need to work with information. Information generates knowledge, and knowledge generates interest. And so you will have better light, a better position for financing, for example. It would be interesting to have a general repository. I'm a biologist from training, and for a few years ago we worked in a global consortium of plants. So any plant that was identified in the Amazon could go to the repository with its DNA sequence and to be able to identify, is anyone working on this? Yes, who is working on this? And if it had not been identified, then okay, which groups are working and can help me to identify? And the same thing we can do with the plants that we can do with the genetic diseases. Okay, that's really interesting. This platform and this scalability is a really interesting concept. If we need to develop treatments for 6,000 diseases, this has a huge cost, and it's a time dedicated to it that families just don't have. This development is also within a regulatory framework that can accompany us better or worse, for better or for worse. Can you help us with the regulation for rare diseases? Between 2019 and 2024, agencies were quite strict. They are actually quite strict still, but they are beginning to be slightly more receptive to being to accepting less data that we need to be generating to reach commercial phase 1, 2, or 3. We can use data from other clients that have been anonymized also, as far as they help us justify that we are moving within this rank to be able to characterize a product, to be able to characterize according to purity, to security, to title, or to specifying the viral genome vectors of the genomes. It's something that we're starting to see from the FDA, but other agencies are starting to be slightly more flexible too. So we can see that families are pushing for investigation. We have the technology to make it scalable, but we're lacking money, right, to finance all this. So that's why I wanted to give the floor to Javier Garcia, who will show us a philanthropic model, a collaborative model to help and finance and push so that these treatments, many treatments that already exist, that are there on a shelf, could end up reaching from the shelf to the patient. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for allowing me to be here. For us, I come from industry. I've been working for many years in pharma. I have my own investment fund, but we immediately realized that we're going to see certain technologies that will allow us to do things but we cannot win money with those. So we decided to create the foundation at the same time as Columbus, with that inspiration to say, okay, we're going to solve these issues. So we started working with two diseases, child Parkinson and SPG50, and the results have been really good. We have 50 kids treated with child Parkinson, but we have a strong challenge ahead of us. How many diseases do we have? At what speed are we going? We would need 50 lives to reach a reasonable number right now. So we are reconsidering which is an accessibility model and a sustainability model that would allow us to go faster. The bottleneck is the money. The technology is there, obviously, but what we want to do is help the families. The families are the ones that inspire us, the ones that start pushing for it, and many of them start raising 750,000 euros, some more, some less. We begin with investigation, but at a certain point we just stop because there's not enough resources to reach the next step. So that's where we come in with our foundation. The first thing that we do is we join all the pieces together to ensure that that development plan makes sense. We push for work with associations and foundations so that they have the feedback, they have the knowledge of where are we going with this, which things that we need to take into account. The manufacturing aspect is something that is not well known by many people, and maybe it's all the key point of it. And we also need to understand the steps and the effort that needs to be put in. From the foundation is based in the United States. We have a group in the United States. They do a scouting of diseases also, and we can see that there are tens of solutions that are prepared, but we need to have a model that these solutions become real treatments. So we're considering a model that uses a regulatory mechanism right now. It's something that is implemented in the United States that does not exist in Europe, called the preventative voucher. Basically, if you develop a treatment for an ultra-rare disease, at the end of the process, you reach the regulation aspect, and you have a voucher, which is like the Disney fast track. Imagine we can just skip the line, basically. So this allows to any industry, any product from any company, skip the regulation waiting line and skip ahead 2 years. And that voucher is sold, actually. So if I have an association, a company that reaches the final point, I can sell it to Merck, to Lilly, to Pfizer. The last voucher was sold for $220 million, actually. So this is our model. We want to have a philanthropic fund, similar to what we do in venture capital, where we tell the investor, if we have success taking one of these three products to the end, you will have an economic return. And if not, you have contributed for this to work. And this economic return will allow you to see the investor. This has a level of professionalization, is treated with the rigor of other investments, of course, and when we receive that voucher, a big part of the voucher remains within the foundation, so we have a model to continue to invest, so we achieve sustainability. We're trying it with different diseases, with SP50, with CDMJ4 and CDMJ7, and we're using the platform ViralGen also because we believe there's a huge synergy with what Diego told us to manage this for this to be replicated at a large scale. We have a fund of between $15 and $20 million that allow us to test this model. And we believe that if this is managed, we'll have more funds, more ideas, and more possibilities to work with different diseases in parallel. Our goal is to work with 10 diseases in 10 years in our foundation. And there's tens of solutions prepared for these steps. So this is a first step, and we believe that the model can go down that path. But there are many other models, and we're open to debating them, and we're open to seeing other possibilities. So I wanted to ask Javier, obviously there's more parents here that say, okay, why do you finance this one and not this other one? Like, how do you choose which ones you finance? This is really hard. Well, in the foundation, we're receiving calls every week. And since the symptoms are very similar, everybody believes that you treat one and you treat all of them, even if the name is the same. Even if SPG50 or SPG52 is just one number in difference, they're very different diseases. So we select diseases for this model when they're ready to go to clinic. Because this is the inflection point, this is the moment where they need a higher economic effort and where all the pieces can be put together. We work with a lot of diseases before to help them understand what needs to be done. Actually, we're working with all the diseases. We're working with CTNV1 with a foundation in Slovenia, for example. and Diego, I believe that we've been working with them for 3 years, right, to help them understand what needs to be done. And we'll begin the trials in 2 weeks, so we can reach that point. It is possible. So we're talking with them to see which is the finance model for the future. We have some ideas that we're activating right now. So it's hard for a family to understand that their disease is in the waiting line, but this work is done to ensure that there's an investigation group that is working on that research, where there's a certain activity to be able to reach the clinical trial point, and this first capital can be sought for, and that is simpler than the second part. But once we reach to the regulation clinical trials, we can reach a model like the one that we've explained. So you've mentioned that you have this pilot model, these few diseases, and you're telling the public if anyone has any other ideas of how doing this, they are more than welcome. I think this can be interesting for our coffee time to discuss these ideas. But I wanted to ask, with the path that you've walked already, you're starting clinical trials, and so you're really reaching the patient. So which lessons learned would you share with other foundations or other public institutions from the path that you've walked? What has worked, what hasn't worked? I think collaborating is very important. Information is key, and we need to have access to that information. So dedicating time to the information, to educating associations on how to do it and how it can be done. For the authorities, I think there will never be an economic model to be able to do it. So the support from institutions is key. In Catalonia, we have the support from associations. We've had a very strong support, but there's also a component of knowledge. For example, what we've learned in child Parkinson has a huge application on adult Parkinson, and the neurodegenerative diseases can be applied in other areas too. So there's a frontier of knowledge that these rare diseases are bringing to the table that makes it necessary to investigate them. First of all, because there's a need, and second, because there's a possibility to expand it to other ones. So institutions need to be aware that this is frontier technology that is solving an issue, but it's not only lost money. And we also can consider financing and accessibility models that in other ways cannot be considered. So I think this is a very interesting, potentially positive model. I would love to have in Europe the same advantage that we have in the United States from a voucher standpoint, from an opportunity standpoint that can really give a prize to this effort. Well, from this perspective, I think everyone that is here with the different role that we play within it can try and do it our best work with the regulator so they can adopt these measures that incentivize. Because, like you saw on screen earlier, innovation in Europe is dropping very quickly, and there's a plan behind this. Because this is worrying, and this is worrying to the pharma industry also. So adopting in this plan the advantages that we could have from incentive regulations, like the FDA voucher, for example, could help finance these projects. So we have seen how there's a need, how the families are pushing for it, how technology is scalable, and there's an alternative financing model, even if the regulation is not as helpful as we would like it to be. But we reach the real world moment, which is when we need to treat our patients. And Laura, I would love to listen to your experience in the management of these diseases, the expectations, the experimental treatments, and to summarize a little bit all of it. I would also like to thank the invitation to be here. First of all, I wanted to highlight the figure of the patient and of the families, because today we're here at this round table, we're all here together, thanks to one of the patients that we follow in the hospital. It's Ona, affected by SPG 50, and it was thanks to Ona, to her family, to the Columbus Foundation, that we were able to create a team and start treating an ultra-rare disease for the first time ever in our hospital. So which challenges does it mean to administer this therapy in the hospital? It has certain challenges. It is possible, but you need to have a team of professionals that are willing to start new paths, take new initiatives. The administration of gene therapy can be very different. In our hospital, we have used intravitreal therapies, intravenous, in many different type of therapies. And we need to have a certain monitoring, security monitoring specific that is really, really important. And we need to give support to the family and manage the expectations. They are experimental therapies, after all. So the first point is security and to guarantee for the future that this therapy is secure. But we also need to manage the expectations of the families, what families expect for the future for certain therapies that are being treated now, and the experience years with this therapy is very short. We need support from the media also in many different senses, since the monitoring is very complex as far as security. And we need to give all the support that the patient needs, that the family needs, and that the hospital needs also to be able to take this treatment to good port. You're talking about support, right? I think this is something that people that manage these therapies, we can see that the complexity is huge, that for every single new case we need a new path. So which type of support do you believe is quintessential for an institution to be able to manage these therapies guaranteeing security, which is the most important point? I think we need to have a team of professionals that are specialized in advanced therapies to be able to give the support long term and maybe establish a few cornerstones to create certain protocols, certain circuits that guarantee working properly, so it can be faster, it can be quicker to administer this medication to other patients, be it through the same path, to the same vector, like our colleagues collected, maybe with the same vehicle. You can treat different diseases by changing the therapy that is within the vehicle itself. But from a practical standpoint, in the day-to-day, at a medical level, the support that you give to the patient will be exactly the same one. So this makes the treatment easier and facilitates monitoring. We're discussing the dramatic number of the diagnosis time and the lack of diagnosis. So what do you think about that? How have families lived this? I think it is true that in the last years we have had huge advancement on diagnosis, but it is something that is still pending. To be able to treat the patients with earlier, we need to improve the diagnosis times. How can we improve them? Well, with better diagnosis technology, but I think it is also important to hold forums like this one and other forums that we can go to make it known that these diseases exist, and specifically at a medical level, specifically for me, for neurology and neuropediatrics, we do try through Congress, through meetings, through different events, we ensure that these innovative therapies exist, and maybe a patient that could have access to that therapy to ensure that they don't miss it out just because they don't have the diagnosis. So we need to establish which are the early symptoms to be able to reach an early diagnosis. You were mentioning, Jesus, that you also went through this, right? That you saw that the time passes and time is short. Yeah, I would like to say that at the end of the day, the patients are kids. Most of them for these diseases are kids. I would also like to highlight that every day that passes, the parents, the families are working. We're suffering the consequence of a disease that we don't know which one it is. Us, as a family, we had reached the point of assuming that Abril maybe could not have the benefits that we can get from a gene therapy, but we thought that other families that joined us, and their collaboration is very important, families from Romania, from other points of Spain outside Barcelona, they were giving the support of the Catalonian investigation. So the time is quintessential, both the diagnosis time and, like Diego said, also to apply this therapy as soon as possible. I think having a roadmap, not having a good roadmap with a good established path, doing things in good time, ensures that you don't have to go back to the starting point again. Yeah, like Laura said, they say they say to a patient, look, I know this is hard, I know that it's hard to, as you are now, but look, this is, with this disease, you need to follow this path, go here, go there, and this would facilitate the hard path that you have to walk when you have a diagnosis for your kid with a devastating disease. In the sense of access, I would also like to highlight that there are certain networks. There's RN, there's FSUR, there are certain reference centers for the RN. These are super useful resources to make sure that these therapies are known that exist. There are certain reference centers, and through them, like for example, the patient in Romania that Jesus was mentioning, through the RN, they got to know that there's this possibility of investigation that is being done in Spain, and they had so it's basically the word, ear to mouth resource through an institutional level. Basically, they need to learn how to navigate this complex system that we have in Europe and Spain, and within Spain, with all the different national system derivations, because they support that, but families need to know which are the paths that they need to walk. I wanted to ask Diego and Javier, not just with your experience from now, but also from the experience that you had previously, what do you believe is necessary from a more political standpoint, call it like that, or from a financing or European collaboration standpoint? How would you ensure that this becomes a real scalable model and not just an anecdote? Both at an information and communication level, from the moment that I can create a repository, a database that puts me in contact with the people that are working in a similar therapy, I think this is the first step, this communication. Because you find this rare disease that no one knows about, but maybe Thialin is working on it. So how can we collaborate with them to reach a clinical standpoint, not only from the perspective of the family or the doctor that identifies this disease, but also the standpoint of the hospitals? Because if we can reinforce the knowledge in the careers related to healthcare, for example, the lab technician, the surgeon, the person that is taking the vector from manufacturer to hospital, they need to be aware that this is a virus, a modified virus. This is not a chemical. This is not paracetamol. This is just a modified virus that needs certain specific treatment and care for the transport and treatment. They need to be familiarized on how to unfreeze, how to manipulate this, which is the clinical device that we use to inject it and reach the brain via intramuscular or intravenous. So we need to have this knowledge in advance. And specifically, not to forget that we have a DNA component, a protein component that needs to be worked on. And if labs can join to give the visibility to say, oh, look, I'm working on this. Don't go down this path, go down this other path, because we know that this concept test works. This would save time, money, and costs. And so we could reach in a more secure manner the clinical manufacture level. And if we reinforce it with the regulation aspect, who are being more open, more flexible, we could accelerate to ensure that these treatments reach the patients in less time. Javier, your vision? I think we're talking about frontier technology. We're in the version 1.0. Yesterday, we published an article about a genius idea from Bidou, an American scientist, where we can start communicating certain aspects. We'll see incredible things in the next year. So in Europe, we cannot just fall asleep thinking, oh, someone else have the solution. No, we need to have initiative and leadership in this area, and it's important to have financing. And the ultra-rare diseases can be a spectacular test field to develop this technology and reach other areas of the world. I think the national healthcare system has certain mechanisms to spread the resources to the areas that are really important. And at a European level, we can unify the criteria to ensure that there's European funds. Great. Many of the grants that we receive come from California, from the NHS in the United States. I don't think I've had any grants from the European Union, so this is very symptomatic. So we need to do something because we're waiting for others to solve it. We have the obligation to solve it because we're going to give an answer to the families, and also because it's a technological change that is here to stay and will change the way that we see medicine. Okay, I think we should start concluding, but here comes a little bit of improvisation for a minute, and I will ask each one of our four speakers. So I will ask them, what are you asking for i4KIDS? We're in a forum to push for the development of technologies and innovations to find solutions for pediatric population and for the rare diseases. So what is your ask to them? I request continuity, to not have just a motivation from this year. I want to see it for 2025, 2026, 2027. I want to see it beyond those years because we're in the frontier of that knowledge and of being able to apply that knowledge to the clinical. So this is the message that I like to transmit. Continuity. Hope for me, hope for my kid, hope for my other 54 kids that exist in the world. I would like to have specific actions to finance and to have access to these diseases. Well, I would like visibility of the rare diseases and accessibility. So to ensure that a family from the living room of their house that receives a diagnosis can connect in a simple way to know if there's something available or not for their kid, some sort of treatment, some sort of monitoring. Okay. Well, this is basically a call to action, like Joan said, and what I'm asking for i4KIDS, in line of what they asked, is to continue having these discussions, to continue to lobbying, to talk to the regulators, to look for financing, to go to the European Commission to request financing. I think there's a lot of people here that are very involved in this, and we cannot just drop the opportunity just because families are working on it, technology exists, there's financing models, and there's hospitals that are prepared and that are ready. So we are all responsible to ensure that this discussion does not end here today. Thank you again. Goodbye.